Namaste.
Namaste.
So, I was thinking about peace, and at first, and isn't that ironic? I was thinking about that on the way down too. That this was the peace sign in the '60s, but it was Nixon's victory sign.
No, this was like this. Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, which
during World War II
right, and
was the victory sign.
and yet Nixon of all people, flashing anything that looked like peace. A little ironic given what we found out since
Well, that's true.
he's gone. So at first I was thinking, well, it's too bad that we don't have many different words for peace, in the same way that it's too bad that we don't have many different words for love in English. But then, as I thought more about it, I decided that was wrong. That no matter what kind of peace we're talking about, it all goes back to the same root, which isn't necessarily true of love. I mean, you love your dog, you love your cat. It's really different than the way you love a friend, except in Montana. and it's different than romantic love. But our struggle with peace, I believe, starts here. And one of the ways, or one of the analogies that maybe helps me with this is this faith journey in the way we saw it manifested when Aaron and I went to see Amy Grant. Because there were 3 performers, and they spanned an age range, and they all came out of evangelicalism. And the youngest one, when she did her banter with the audience, tended to preach at the audience, and preached with evidence of biblical passages that were cited. And so at that point in our development, I think that's kind of symbolic of what it's like to be 20s to mid-30s. It's like proof and argument. That's going to persuade you. I'm going to show you how I think it is, no matter whether it's faith or whether it's life. I'm going to show you how I think it is. I'm going to prove it to you, and then of course you'll have no choice but to believe it. And yet, of course, as we go on, we figure out that it doesn't really work that way. And so the second performer was probably in her 40s and had been through a divorce, which is no longer, I guess, in contemporary Christian circles, the end of you, like it was some years ago. And while she did a little bit of that, here's a chapter and verse, she did a little more talking about the struggles she had in life. And so that's the second phase in life's journey and moving towards peace, is that you start out proving it, that's how it is, here's the facts, any fool can see. And then you get to that place where you're a little bit less of a fool and you start to notice that sometimes life doesn't line up with the facts. And this struggle ensues where you're still trying to make it do what you want it to do, and life won't. And then you get to Amy Grant, who's in this place where while earlier in her career she did some of that stuff that seemed like that, now her spiritual experience is so integrated with her life that she talks about it in terms of the things of life. What is it to have children or be around children? What is it to have lost? What is it to just live authentically? And all of that need, or maybe even the helpfulness as well of these facts, kind of falls away, because life has shown us that it doesn't always work that way. And I think you can look at peace across that spectrum as well. That you start out earlier in life saying, I will be at peace if the world conforms to my expectations. And then, somewhere along the way, probably in your mid-30s to 40 or so, you start to figure out, and it's younger for a lot of folks, but you start to figure out that life maybe isn't going to conform to my expectations. And now, what do you struggle? What do? Do I change my expectations? Do I find some way to find meaning in the fact that life won't conform? I mean, how do I go from here? And I think there's a period of turmoil and feeling cast adrift. And then I think the third stage is we authentically get to the place where we say, life doesn't conform to my expectations. It's not supposed to.
Yeah.
And the real meaning is found in living that life and participating in it fully. And true peace isn't the absence of problems or the absence, if you will, of nonconformity with our expectations, but coming to understand things as they are, as opposed to things as we would have them.
So it's like acceptance.
It's acceptance, but it takes a lot of letting go. It's not attachment to some extent as well, which is different from detachment.
Yeah.
But that just doesn't happen like this. And I'm going to say that you don't have to follow that three-step trajectory. In fact, there's many people who get to the second phase where they're saying, holy cow, life doesn't conform to my expectations. And their answer is, I just have to scream those a little louder. And if I shout them loud enough, life will conform. If I pray just right, life will conform. If I join the right church, life will conform. If we give enough foreign aid to the right countries, life will conform. And if it doesn't conform, we can always bomb the hell out of them, and then it will conform.
No.
And people that are stuck in that cycle don't look back. In other words, they think, we'll bomb the hell out of them, and then they'll conform. And they seem not to notice that that's been tried many, many times, in fact, with different weapons throughout human history, and it has never once worked. But to admit that is to say that maybe I'm not in charge. And that's a huge developmental step, and not everybody gets there. Not everybody gets to the place where they are willing to allow the world and everything in it to be what it is. And recognize that it's not Play-Doh for them to mold or shape or put through the press so it comes out in cute little star forms just the way we wanted it to. So then I was reflecting on this this passage from John, which is one of my favorites. I mean, what I've always kind of resonated with that. I have to look at it. First of all, I love the fact that this translation took the paraclete word that has been comforter, been a lot of things, and turned it into companion. Because I think that's helpful, even if it's not the best translation of paraclete, and I don't know if it is or not, I'm not a linguist, but I can be cunning.
Try to describe it.
But the peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. It's always been so comforting to me, but I never had a good metaphor for I give to you not as the world gives. I thought, what does that mean? And then in the Uber thing, I think it was in the Uber thing, I talked to so many people I lose track of who tells me what story. But I'm pretty sure it was a woman in my back seat. I was in the front. And, and she was telling me about her mother's funeral, which is kind of an odd thing for somebody. Being an Uber driver is like being somebody's barber or hairdresser or bartender. People get in and they just tell you things. Well, her mother, somehow we got on funerals, and her mother had died, and a bunch of people brought flowers or had flowers sent to the funeral. And when the service was over, a bunch of them went up and took their flowers and took them home.
What?
Yes. I had never heard of
that.
Me either.
Wow.
They usually leave them in the church.
I mean, you could go
Yeah.
get Easter lilies at the last Easter service, but.
Yeah, pick up the poinsettias after Christmas, although why you
yeah.
want them then, I don't really know. But apparently this happens, and she told me she'd seen it happen in other places. And she seemed, really a rational human being, so I believed that she was telling me the truth. And I said to her, I said, I'm really having a hard time wrapping my head around that. What do you do? Do you take the plant home, put it on the table, and some friends come over? They say, oh, those are really nice flowers. Who sent those to you? Do you say, oh, I just sent those to a funeral and took them when it was over?
See.
I mean, but that's,
She's picturing it, you know that.
yeah, maybe they got confused about how when there's a spray of roses on the casket and they give one rose to each family member at the end, maybe they thought that meant that you could just go get your own, I don't know. But anyway, I thought, well, that's how the world gives, isn't it? And that's the barrier, I think, to this. It's the same kind of thing as this peace trajectory, if you will. It says, I'm going to give you this, but I'm not going to let go of it. Because I might have a need for it later. And whether that's literal or metaphorical,
Yeah.
doesn't much matter. I'm going to give you peace, which might mean I'm going to give you the appearance of peace. I'm going to do what I think you want me to do. I'm going to go along with the idea. I'm going to say, that's great, Bob, until I decide it isn't. And I'm going to snatch it back. I'm going to let you be you until, it makes me a little too uncomfortable. And then I'll whip out my Bible and look for those verses again. Or whatever I use, you can use the Constitution, you can use anything. Whip it out, look through it and say, conform. And the problem is the toll that takes on the one who does it. It's a hypervigilance, and God knows I have a PhD in hypervigilance. But it's a constant monitoring. It's like being on guard duty 24/7. And it's like having a child, an infant. And you have to be monitoring it all the time. And new parents say, God, am I tired? Well, it's like deciding to sign up for that kind of vigilance with everybody around you, everything around you, every day, every night for the rest of your life. And it wears us down. And we become irritable, and we become frustrated, and there's no peace in that, because there's no letting go. So when we think about peace, I really believe, as the Dalai Lama does, that it starts with each individual. Whether we're talking about personal peace or peace on any level. And it starts on finding a way to let things be as they are, and really honestly being okay with that. Not just pretending, not going, I don't care. Or, to quote my mother, it doesn't bother me. Well, yeah, yes it does. I mean, clearly it does. And that's a process too. And I think maybe that's what that 3-step evolution I tried to describe before is about. It's about not being able to let go at all. Finding out in the middle you have to let go, but really struggling with it because you're not ready yet. And getting to the place where it can just be. And not only are we okay with that, but we get to the point where we can actually enjoy the process. But it involves dropping expectations and living into what really is. And that's not easy. Amen.
Amen. Still doesn't mean you take ours.
No.